The key point came in the late 1980s. It's a strange story. I was working for the BBC still at the time, and I just felt this presence around me. Like when I was in a room alone, there was someone else there. And I remember sitting in the Kensington Hilton Hotel working for the BBC one night on the side of the bed, and I said to whatever, for God's sake, if there's something there, would you please contact me, because you're driving me up the wall.
While all that was going on, I was having some very strange experiences throughout 1989, and that experience was that when I was in a room alone, it didn't feel like I was alone. And it was kind of, you know, mild to start with, but as the year unfolded, it became very, very tangible. And I sat in early 1990 in a hotel called the Kensington Hilton. I was working for the BBC. It's just near the BBC in Shepherd's Bush. And this presence was so obvious and blatant that I said to the empty room, if there's something there, would you please contact me? Talked about what happened to me when I went to the Icke in 1990, when I felt for about a year that there was this presence around me, and when I was in a room alone, I wasn't alone, and it got more and more, and eventually, long story short, I went to see a psychic for the first time in my life, and she started, after the 2 visits, on the 3rd visit, she started to get this stuff, this figure in her head, and she said, I'm being told to tell you things. But anyway, where I'm going with this is, among these messages that was given to me in 1990 were, he will say things and wonder where they came from. They will be our words. Sometimes we will put knowledge into his mind. Sometimes he will be led to knowledge. And another one was, a little bit later, arduous seeking is not necessary. It was all organized a long time ago, words to that effect. All he has to do is follow the clues. Well, all I can say about they, whoever they are, at some level of disembodied consciousness, is that they have done exactly what they said on the tin.
David had told us that his first moment of enlightenment had occurred when a voice entered his head while shopping with his son on the seafront.
This is the newsagent I told you about, where basically it all started. I was walking along here, and I walked in this door and turned to where Gareth was reading his Steam Train books, and this is where it happened, just the other side of this door, where I'm like, what's going on? Go and look at the books on the far side. What? And that's where it started, 1990, March 1990.
And suddenly I felt over 1989 that there was a presence in the room whenever I was alone. And it became more and more tangible as 1989 unfolded. It was bizarre, really, because the Green Party in Britain had their biggest electoral year in 1989 at European elections. And I was going through all this while, whenever I was in a room alone, like a hotel room or something, there was this presence, you know. And eventually, it got so powerful towards the end of '89 that I was sitting on the side of a bed in a hotel called the Kensington Hilton in London, just down from the BBC headquarters. And I said to this apparently empty room, look, if there's something there, would you please contact me, because you'll drive me up the wall. About 2 weeks later, it must have been, I'm with my son, he was a little boy then. I saw that Gareth wasn't there. I knew where it would be. It'd be in the news shop just down next to us. So I walked in, and he was reading the Steam Train books, because he likes Steam Train, certainly like me. And I said to him, come on, Gaz, we'll go and get some lunch. And as I turned, my feet wouldn't move. Now, this is a guy who's not been into any of this stuff. He's a television presenter and national spokesman for the Green Party, a journalist, basically. And my feet wouldn't move. And I heard, well, it's really a voice, but a very strong thought form passed through my mind, which didn't seem attached to me. Why would I think it? And it said, go and look at the books on the far side. So I went over, and in among the romantic novels was this book with a woman's face on the front. And I picked it up because it was so different to the rest. Turned it over, saw the word psychic. So I read this book in 24 hours, and I wrote to her. I went to see her. And what I told her was,
I had arthritis, which I have, and maybe her hands-on healing would help. I told her not the real reason I went, which was, would she pick up what the heck this presence is I've been feeling for nearly a year? Well, actually, for a year by then. And we went to the first couple of times, and it saw her 4 times, and she did the hands-on healing, and we had a chat about other dimensions and stuff. All made sense to me. Because I'd always rejected religion and always rejected the scientific view of reality. I just hadn't focused on, what's okay, so what's the alternative? And then the 3rd time I went, I'm lying there on this medical type bench thing, and I felt like a spider's web on my face, which really took me aback, because I'd read in her book that when other dimensions or whatever, spirits or whatever you want to use, are trying to lock into you, you sometimes feel like a spider's web on your face. Well, funny enough, I never had before, and I never have since, but at that moment, seriously powerful, real, tangible. So I'm going, oh my goodness me, what's going on? And she's kind of doing this by my left knee. And I never said a word to her. And then suddenly, she launches her head back and goes, my God, I've got to close my eyes for this one, this is powerful. And she sees this, this figure in her mind, and she says, this figure's, or whatever she called it, is asking me to pass information to you. And take into account, you know, I'm a television presenter, presenting the sport and the news at the time. And suddenly she starts saying that this entity, or this projection of consciousness, was saying that I was going to go out on a world stage eventually and reveal great secrets. That there was a shadow across the world that had to be lifted, that there was going to be a spiritual revolution in my lifetime because of a vibrational change. That's why the first book I wrote was called Truth Vibrations, after that vibrational change.
The beings, which we call the guys, told us about.
You call them the guys?
The guys, yeah.
But the beings like
Tarot,
Rakowski.
and yeah, that's right.
Right.
It's
highly likely that I'm something to do with the whole process, because I'm interviewing you.
Well, it's difficult, because I need to check all this out, because you're throwing this at me, and I need to sit down and check this out with the guys. But I would said that you were certainly involved in a great chance of being involved at that time.
David often says that these beings have always guided him. It was the same beings that originally contacted him that are still guiding him.
Well, yeah, I've been on a long journey of nearly 20 years now, consciously doing this, and some force has been pushing me in different directions.
In Love Changes Everything, he says, those who are helping the planet and humanity through this crucial period in their evolution, they have asked me to put together in this book all that I have learned so far. And that, quote, communicating with such beings on other levels of creation is the most natural thing in the world. When he describes how it is that this communication with the guys takes place, he says, quote, this process is called channeling. The thought forms can be turned into written words. This is known as automatic writing. Your hand writes on the paper, sometimes with incredible speed, but the words and information are not yours and could not possibly be yours because you often know nothing about the subjects taking shape in front of you. It is also possible to hear the thought forms as a soft, gentle voice inside your head. I call this method getting it direct. On a more limited level, it is possible to communicate through dowsing.
Perhaps.
Do you actually hear the voices in your head?
It depends. Sometimes you hear voices, sometimes it comes in terms of them talking through you, so they talk through your voice box. And it also comes through what's known as automatic writing. You get a sheet of paper, you put a pen in your hand, and they just take over your arm, they write. And they write amazing things which you have no comprehension of. I mean,
he also still quotes from them from time to time as evidence that he still considers the information accurate. An example is that he closes most of his lectures with a quote from a being named Magnu from his book Love Changes Everything. And he says that his words are really their words.
And wonder where they came from. They will be our words.
These beings, as we saw in the first chapter, dictated the belief system of theosophy to him. And although he does not call it that today, it is clear that that's what it is. We never have realized that we are being led like sheep to the slaughter to what I like to call the New World Order. Let me introduce you to the real plan of the Illuminati. The one thing that has never changed in Icke's teaching is the idea of the coming evolution of humanity.
One of the themes at that time, we're talking 1990, was that there was a consciousness shift coming. I kept meeting psychic people a lot in those days, and they kept saying, I'm getting something, I'm being told to tell you this, and again it was, there's a consciousness shift coming. There is an awakening coming. And now as the 90s have become the new century, more and more this stuff about this shift is going on.
This also happens to be the central thesis to theosophy, the mother of the New Age movement. In fact, the very term New Age is referring to a coming time of spiritual evolution. This fact alone should show you how the idea of a spiritual evolution is the only idea that matters to these beings.
Now, the Theosophical Society is the grandmother of all New Age movements. Realize that when you join the Masons, you become yoked to sterling citizens like this. This is a list of all of the prominent occultists of the 20th century. All the witches, all the ceremonial magicians, all the Satanists, all of the Theosophists and New Agers that are really movers and shakers of late 19th and early 20th century. Every single one of them was a Mason, a very high-level Mason. Then we have the Kabbalistic religions. I talked about that, the Kabbalah. Then we have the Gnostics. The Gnostics are basically people who believe that you are saved by secret knowledge, to put it simply. Gnosticism, it comes from the Greek word gnosis, which means knowledge, like diagnosis or prognosis. And what they believed is that Christianity, as it is constituted in the Bible, is far too simple. It's a Greek heresy off of the truth of Christianity. And what it means is that you have to go through all sorts of elaborate rituals and details and deal with archons and aeons and logos and all these different things in order to receive salvation. Modern day Gnostics would be examples, for example, the Mormons, the Masons, a lot of New Agers. All these people believe they're saved by acquiring some sort of arcane, hidden wisdom.
When I first had my conscious awakening in 1990, and I started meeting psychic after psychic who were just giving me the same basic confirming, repeating information.
The voices continued. They told David that he was the Son of God and that the world was about to be torn apart by natural disasters. David was panicked by these messages, and he sought advice from a psychic.
All these thousands of years.
Well, now, let me get the story right. The press claim that you claim to be the Son of God.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true?
Yes, you see, the thing is that, you see, it's quite funny, really. You know, 2,000 years ago, had a guy called Jesus sat here and said these same things, you would still be laughing. It's really, really funny that we've not really moved on that much. There is a thin line of truth in the Bible, certainly. And many of the things that the being Jesus, who certainly did exist and certainly did die in that way, says are accurate reflections of what he said, but they are taken out of context and misinterpreted.
I've written 5 books in the last 3 years, challenging the whole idea of cults and gurus and messiahs and all these areas that we're encouraged to give our responsibility to. There is no guy going to appear on a cloud to judge the human race or change the world.
You know when you press too many keys on a computer and it freezes because there's too much information to process?
It was too much.
Well, it was like a bubble had burst in me, and insights, concepts, information, all the stuff were pouring into my conscious mind. My body, a computer, obviously said, I'm freezing. And so it was in that 3 months that I went on the Wogan show and all the rest of it. Now, I wasn't saying that I'm like Jesus. I would strongly suggest that the Jesus stories are are just rewrites of ancient stories using different names. So the evidence for that is overwhelming. And I would face enormous opposition, but they would always be there to protect me. And they would put knowledge into my mind, and they would guide me to knowledge so that I would put the puzzle pieces together.
Who are they?
I don't know. I don't know.
He says, quote, "My own feeling and what I have channeled and seen leads me to believe that Jesus survived the crucifixion. I had a very strong vision of Jesus on the cross. During that vision, I was with Jesus, experiencing what he felt. He experienced great pain in his hands and wrists, and he was utterly exhausted. I then saw a pole being raised with a cloth, which was offered to his mouth. From this he took a drink. Soon after this he appeared to lose consciousness. When he awoke, he was lying with people all around him, attending to his wounds. They were all in white, I remember. It was clear that Jesus was in a state of shock. He whispered, 'I live, I live,' as though he had expected to leave the physical body. I had other visions and channeling, which together gave me this overall picture of what actually happened 2,000 years ago." Now listen to his version of the crucifixion in his next book, Love Changes Everything. When the channeling, crucifixion, had finished, one of the followers asked if Jesus could be taken down, and his request was granted. He was still alive at this point, but the swift movement of the sword removed him from the physical level. Only Jesus knew for certain he would die. So, in this version, Jesus did die, which is obviously a massive contradiction from the previous book with no explanation of the discrepancy. Keep in mind, in that book, Jesus personally talks to David on a regular basis. For instance, Jesus is quoted as saying things like, quote, "I was so determined, David, so determined to ensure that the truth could not disappear because one man was nailed to some wood, and I knew the effect it would have on Lucifer Satan if the energies were powerful enough." He says this about a visit he made to a church as a tourist, quote, "Looking up at a large painting of Christ, the picture suddenly turned black and moved around before my eyes. Only the face of Christ was still. Suddenly, I felt a sensation I can only describe as someone pushing a pneumatic drill into the top of my head. I gripped the pew I was standing beside, and my body vibrated from the top of my head to the base of my spine as something seemed to go through me." He says that months later, he was told that he received a gift of energy from one of the ascended masters of the planetary system at this point. Interesting that revulsion towards Jesus is actually quite observable among these entities. I would even go so far as to say that it's empirically testable in our modern times.
And I walked to the center of the circle, and suddenly my feet go again, like they did in the news shot, but only seriously more powerful. They're like magnets pulling my feet to the ground. And I think, oh crikey, I recognize that, here we go. And then I felt like a drill going in the top of my head and through my body, through my feet into the ground, and then another one coming the other way. And then my arms go out at 45 degrees like that. I never made any decision to do it. And of course, you hold your arms out there for, a minute. It starts to ache, well, my shoulders do anyway. It was the best part of an hour. It must be 45 minutes to an hour, my arms were like that. And when it was over, my shoulders were agony, but when it was going on, nothing. And what then started to happen is this energy coming through me. This is February 1991.
So what happens is gradually, and this happened to me, I went through an experience where I was deluged in the blinding white light of Lucifer. It felt like my brain was being parboiled in pure light. I cried out in agony. It drove me to my knees. It hurt so badly. And I received the consciousness of Lucifer. I was illuminated. And this is what it means to become an illuminatus. It's just a Latin word for illuminated one. And what this means is that gradually something happens to your mind. It's like a satanic virus is introduced into your mind, and just like a computer virus, it begins to overwrite the human software of your brain with evil, with something that's a lack of compassion, a lack of mercy. You begin to look at human beings as if they were cattle or bugs. You begin to have just, it's hard for me to even talk about because I'm so ashamed of it.
Communicated almost daily with Rakorsky, the one known as Lord of all creation, who is directly responsible for the changes the earth will undergo. I also communicate often with the one we know as Jesus, the spirit of the earth, and many others. Now, keep in mind that this Rikorsky is the same spirit that dictated much of his first book, The Truth Vibrations, back when the I first appeared. He says on page 21 of The Truth Vibrations, quote, "Soon after this, the I appeared. One evening I was lying on my bed in a hotel room when I closed my eyes, and there, forming out of the darkness, was the shape of an eye. It was there for a split second at first before dispersing, but gradually it became permanent."
Le candidat va devoir chercher à découvrir ce qui se cache dans une centaine d'enveloppes.
Et au bout du 7 ou 8e test, le candidat, qui n'était pas du tout habitué à ce genre de phénomène, a entendu une voix. À partir de là, en fait, il a reçu à chaque test une information auditive. Il a entendu cette voix lui dire quelque chose qui lui permettait ensuite de faire son choix. Quand on a dépouillé, en fait, le résultat a été 79% de réussite.
Nous avons demandé à rencontrer ce candidat au pouvoir fascinant, mais ce n'est pas possible. Aujourd'hui, il préfère rester discret.
C'est vrai que le candidat a eu tellement peur parce que ce qui s'est passé, et c'est vrai que pour l'instant, il ne veut plus entendre parler de protocole scientifique.
It's an inversion of what not just we would like it to be, but an inversion of the original reality that it replaced. And this is one reason why you get Satanists and stuff like that using inverted symbols for their symbolic language. Everything is inverted for the reasons I'm talking about.
A month, 2 months into it, I sat down to start writing that day. And the energy in the room changed. I thought, I know this, I recognize this. The energy in the room changed. There was a vibrational change. You could feel it. The atmosphere changed, is a simple way of putting it. I recognized this. And what I then got as this was happening is the basic first theme was the moon is not real. Of course, there's more to know about that as came, but the moon is not real. The moon is not what you think it is. And I'm thinking, the moon's not what you think it is. Now, I've had one or two inklings about that over the years, little thought, you know, in the moon, but then it's gone. It's never gone anywhere. If you look in Star Wars, George Lucas, Bill, is such a massive insider. He ain't talking from bloody imagination. And this stuff about in a galaxy far, far away, excuse me, this one, thank you, George. And, you know, he has the theme there of a planet being destroyed. And he has the theme of the Death Star. What is the Death Star? It looks like the moon. And it's a construct, and it's a construct that's used to try to take over planets. I think there are many of these things.
Étoile noire signalée. L'ennemi sera à portée de tir dans 15 minutes. Turbine incendie.
Vous avez vu? C'est gigantesque.
And of course you hear one and you think, ooh. And you hear two and you think, oh my God, back burner. You hear 3, you hear 4, you hear 5, you hear 6 in different countries. Now, these nodules on their head are something that come up again and again. And for some reason, drinking human blood, particularly the blood of blonde-haired, blue-eyed people, seems to be very beneficial to holding mammal codes open.
Bien. Si vous nous disiez tout ce que vous savez.
Il faudrait que vous voyiez ce que j'ai filmé, mais là, c'est assez ressemblant.
crois qu'il faut arriver à découvrir ce qu'ils veulent en réalité.
En réalité? Bien sûr. Ils nous ont déjà menti.
Et essayez de pratiquer le lavage de cerveau avec ce procédé de conversion dont vous parliez. Il ne faut pas nous leurrer. Ce qui se passe risque d'être très grave.
Troisièmement.
C'est un rendez-vous dangereux pour tous les deux. Il fallait que je vous voie.
Attends de voir cette maison, elle te plaira, j'en suis sûr.
Il faut qu'on se dépêche, maman nous attend.
Laissez-nous.
Alors? Qu'en pensez-vous?
J'ai trouvé votre Bible d'un grand intérêt. Vous m'avez démontré que j'avais des faiblesses. Je m'étais toujours interdit d'y penser. J'ignorais leur existence. Et il n'est pas question que je leur permette de survivre. Avoir des faiblesses, mon cher petit curé, vous rend facilement vulnérable.
But it's not like it's like a week, a month, 2 months, 3 months. This is a concentrated sequence. And I've learned over the years that to follow this and to recognize it, which is not difficult because it gets more powerful and the sequence gets smaller. And the reptilian thing started coming out like that. I started to get insights in the fact that, not necessarily reptilian, but that there was a non-human element to this. And at that point, I traveled America for place to place talking for about 15 days and met 12 separate people who told me about reptilian entities and their experiences with them. And that's how it works, and then it goes on. So.
Intéressant. Des symboles maçonniques.
Nous les avons trouvés dans la paume de la main d'un suspect.
Monsieur, ces signes par terre, quel est leur sens? J'en ai vu dans plusieurs pièces.
Conformément à la tradition, quand un architecte dessine une loge, il en casse partout dans le décor. Ils sont issus du code maçonnique.
Ah, un code. Donc chacun de ces symboles correspond à une lettre. Voilà qui est très intriguant.